everybody. I'm Mrs. Clements.
And I'm Mr. Marshall.
And this is U.S. History Flipped. Flip, flip, flip. Trying to do something different. All right, guys. It is the Psychodelic 70's. And the nifty disco ball will tell you when you need to write. I'm feeling pretty psychedelic right now.
I love those disco balls.
I love disco balls as well. All right. So, wow, that's distracting. I'm just going to stare at the pretty thing. Disco. All right. So, guys, for this, you don't need to write the small stuff. You can just kind of write the big stuff. So, we're talking about the domestic policy of the 1970s. We already talked about, or will be, or at some point in time, in some timeline, we'll be talking about the foreign policy of the 1970s. So we're talking about what's going on here at home. And I love this picture of Nixon. Like, he's angry. So Nixon has an interesting thing going on in terms of stuff at home. The economy is starting to go down, and so he's working trying to slow inflation. What is inflation? Does anyone know? Anyone? Inflation is when prices go up, when the value of money goes down. So he's trying to slow that because we don't like that. He's also trying to decrease the size of government. He says, oh my gosh, between the New Deal and the Great Society, government has gotten huge. And you definitely see the difference between the Democrats of FDR, Kennedy, and LBJ, and the Republican idea here of Nixon. He was definitely very much opposed to protests, and we will probably be talking more about this later, but definitely, you know, he has this whole list of people that he is not fond of and wants them to not be as vocal. And he definitely gets criticized for moving slowly on civil rights and on women's rights. And if you ever want to have fun, listen to some of his tapes where he uses some special, colorful language about people of different ethnicities and genders that aren't men, which you'll never guess what gender that is. But the big thing in terms of domestic stuff that he's known for is the Watergate break-in. And basically, here's the deal. So he runs for election in 1968. And he wins, and it's amazing because, you know, he's coming back from that really traumatic loss for him in 1960. So he comes back and he wins in 1968, but he's got sort of this complex where he not only wants to win again when he runs in 1972, he wants to kill it. He wants to totally just trounce the other guy. So, it's sort of convoluted how it all gets started, but basically the Democratic headquarters were at the Watergate office building in Washington, D.C., and there's a break-in of these guys who were Cuban. It's, again, just to add to the intrigue. And it would have ended there, but what you have is a couple of reporters from the Washington Post that keep following the story, and they find out that there's bigger stuff going on than people have been led to believe. And as they're digging, the government's the Nixon administration just starts covering things up even more and more. And so, you know, we get to the point where Nixon does know about some of this stuff and just wants it covered up. Some people get fired, other people resign, some people go to jail. And what ends up happening is, ends up going to the Supreme Court because Congress now hears about it and they're saying, yeah, dude, this isn't good. And so they know, they have actually heard that Nixon has tapes, and this is just part of Nixon's just super cool personality of paranoia, that he records everything, like everything. He's recording his conversations in person. He's recording his conversations on the phone. And so the Congress, they want to have access to these tapes. Nixon says, you can't have access to these tapes, that there is sensitive information that people can't have. And so what the Supreme Court rules in Nixon versus the United States is that, no, dude, you're not above the law. You need to turn in your tapes. And so pretty soon afterwards, Nixon ends up resigning. He is the only president who has ever resigned. He was not impeached. He resigned. Now, were they working on impeaching him? Absolutely. They definitely were. And I always think it's ironic because Hillary Clinton back then was, working, as a congressional aide, trying to get the charges brought up on Nixon, which I find ironic because her husband ends up getting impeached later on in '98. But yeah, this is a big deal. And so the big significance is the lack in trust in the president. And our good friend, the Regents, really likes to compare Nixon and the Watergate scandal with the Teapot Dome scandal of Harding, with the corruption during Ulysses S. Grant's presidency. And so again, we get this time where people are not trusting the president. Am I talking about? I am talking. You know what? I'm going to talk about Ford, and you're going to like it. So anyway, Ford is our only non-elected president. He became president because he was vice president of Nixon, but he became vice president because the previous dude, Spiro Agnew, which, by the way, that goes in my list.
Name.
Totally goes in my list of potential baby names for that day when it comes, blah, 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 whatever. Spiro Agnew Clemens. But anyway, so he had to resign because he was corrupt. So Gerald Ford became vice president because he was appointed. He becomes president because Nixon resigned, so he was never elected. He was a really nice guy. Like, we would, just like Homer, we would have totally hung out with him. But he makes some tough decisions, which today we look back on and we say, good job, Gerald Ford. But back then, he was not very popular. He pardoned Nixon, which basically meant anything that, any crime that Nixon would have been charged with, dealing with Watergate, he couldn't be charged with. He also provided amnesty for people who had dodged the draft during Vietnam. And again, all these people had gone to Canada and it was just crazy. And he gave them amnesty so they wouldn't be charged. We also were dealing with issues economically in terms of our relations with OPEC in the Middle East, where they were embargoing oil. They weren't sending us oil, which we kind of are dependent on, especially in the 70s. Have you seen those cars? They're ginormous. So the fact that they don't have oil for them made them sad. And as I said previously, not elected.
Yeah, and then our next president after that, we get Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy!
Who was apparently a really, really nice guy.
He was.
And he was, peanut
Well, he
farmer.
still is. He's still alive, kids.
That's right. And he was a peanut farmer, loved to farm peanuts.
As we all do.
Which they actually put into some of his presidential ads, like when he was campaigning. His big thing was this whole stagflation, which was not good. The economy just kind of stopped doing much, but the prices kept on going up on things. And if the prices on things go up and nothing else is going up, then everything gets more expensive. And it just was not good. So he wasn't really popular in terms of the economics of the time.
Yeah, because people, they enjoy, money.
Yeah,
And
we like buying things.
indeed.
And then, so these are two other huge things that happened at the time. And the one on the left, really, really good. One on the right, not so good. So the one on the left is the Camp David Accords. It was amazing that he was able to kind of help Egypt and Israel get together and actually hammer out a peace agreement, stop shooting bullets and throwing bombs at each other. So that, awesome. Now what happens over here is pretty bad, which is the Iran hostage crisis, which is where a whole bunch of Americans get held hostage for an incredibly long period of time, and they actually end up getting released, what was it, the day after Jimmy Carter left office or something like that?
Actually, the day of, at noon, when Ronald Reagan was sworn in.
Yeah. So
Tricky Iranians, tricky.
Yeah, so that's definitely a straight out statement of not liking Jimmy Carter.
And I think that might be it, guys.
Yeah.
We'll miss you, like how we miss that hole that we got in our head.